Hello and welcome to PM Express. My name is Nana Ansakwa the fourth, and I say if it's good, it must happen twice. Now, last week we started a conversation which I felt did not end, and we need to continue. But then I started by saying that until the lions have their own historians, the tales of hunting would always glorify the hunter. And today we are here for the lion to tell his own story as to what happens in the jungle. And that's why we are here. There is nothing that I find, something I find strange is telling black people that they had a good history. They look at you thinking, what are you talking about? Our history was not good until we got in touch with the Westerners and they brought us civilization. Whether it is said or not, that is the undertone, and that is how we are oriented, and that's how we grew up. That until we came across the Westerners, we were barbaric, we were heathenism. Indeed, the missionaries said this was heathen land that needed to be rescued. But is that entirely true? So today we're going all the way back to the center of the earth back then, which was Egypt. And those days, Egyptians were black. Can you believe it? They were not light-skinned. So we're going to have an education and come all the way down to Ghana and find out, are we in danger of losing our customs, traditions, and culture? With me to discuss this is Osofo Kofiche Ahaji, a thespian, African, if I may say.
Thank you very much.
Osofo, you're welcome again.
It's a pleasure being with you.
Yes, it's a pleasure having you on my show. It was a lot of education. I watched last week's show with some family members, and they were agreeing and disagreeing and agreeing and disagreeing. But the truth is that we don't like to say that our ancestors were right. It's not comfortable for us to say. So we're going to go all the way back to when Egypt were black and, educate ourselves as to what happened many, many years ago in the first dynasty.
Thank you very much, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share my little knowledge with the viewing public. May I say my felicitations to all those who will be prepared to learn. Because in the Nile Valley, they had a wise man who taught virtually everybody. To start with, I will just read something from this book by Cornelius Teta on ancient Egypt, before we go back to who the ancient Egyptians were. Cornelius Teta writes in his book, The Secret Medicine of the Pharaohs, on page 14. He states, in the first dynasty, more than 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians had a decimal system and could calculate the surface of a triangle, a square, a trapezoid, or even a circle. In the latter case, they constructed the square of 8/9 to the number 8/9 of the diameter, which gave a value to the number pi of 3.1605. Only in the year AD 1596 did the circular number, which the analysts must have known for the construction of the pyramids, enter our mathematics.
Wow.
So, the ancient Egyptians knew how to calculate the diameter of a circle. But what are we being told in our schools? That everything you learn in mathematics is credited to one white man or the other. Now, even the calculation of the hypotenuse of a triangle, we have something called the Pythagorean theorem. I believe anybody who has studied mathematics would have learnt about Pythagoras and his theorem. But 6,000 years before Pythagoras was born, the same theorem accredited to him was used in the construction of the pyramids of Egypt. We still stand today. So you will see that Pythagoras didn't invent anything. Now when you go to the Archimedes principle of flotation, I will just take you down to Jamestown. You see our fishermen, they don't know anything about Archimedes' principle. yet they used that principle. Ancient Egyptians were using the principle of flotation. And if I show you the picture, you will see that they had constructed sea-going vessels. What were they using? The same principle which had been accredited to some Greek man. Now, from the tomb of Pharaoh Ramses III, 1,200 years before the Common Era, the ancient Egyptian identified himself as number one, the black man. This is the other black man. So ancient Egyptians were blacks. That brings us to the question of what went wrong. That today we have those who are in the last, the Semites, being the occupants of the land of Egypt. The Christian Bible tells us that God got angry with the Pharaoh. Because God was angry with the Pharaoh, God asked Moses and Aaron to go and demand the independence of the Israelites or the Jews from the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh was supposed to have refused first, and God sent some pestilence to harass them until the Pharaoh agreed and allowed the Hebrews or the Jews to move. You know of the famous song, "Let My People Go."
Yes.
And they were supposed to have crossed the Red Sea into Canaan. Meanwhile, Canaan itself was part of Egypt, ruled by the Pharaoh. So when you leave, you say, for instance, you are in Accra. You say you don't like the presidency of John Mahama. Then you move from Accra and you go and settle in Nsawam. What have you achieved? Nothing. So when we take all these ones into consideration, that the population of Egypt today is not what we saw in the picture, the question arises, where did the black people go? The black people have built, let's come to this one. We have been celebrating some joke in the aeronautics or the aviation industry, crediting first the Icarus brothers for being the first people to have attached feathers to their arms and jumped from a hilltop to launch the world into the aviation age about 100 years ago. Then came the Wright brothers of the US. They also claimed the same thing for the same number of years. And on top of them came Leonardo da Vinci, who was supposed to have flown the first flying engine 200 years earlier. But I can show you a picture of what the ancient Egyptians made, the glider, 2,000 years earlier. So who brought about aviation? It was the black man. The blacks, when they go into the aviation industry, whatever be the examination conducted, the blacks will always be on top, because that is something they have. Now in my language, the Ewe language, we call the aircraft Yamavu, the air car. Who then coined that phrase? It was from ancient Egypt. See that when our people were, what led them to leave ancient Egypt was the invasion. Invasion by the Hyksos, the Assyrians, the Turks, and what have you. It were ending up with the British. But Julius Caesar was there. And Julius Caesar married Cleopatra. And Cleopatra, like I said the other time, gave birth to a boy who became Caesarus, who was named Caesarus. But when Cleopatra went back to follow the husband, Julius Caesar, to Rome, she took the scribes along, and they carried over 200,000 papyri scrolls containing all the knowledge system of ancient Egypt. So the Romans, if you go to the Vatican today, in the vault of the Vatican, you will have these papyrus scrolls. And what led to the Nicaea conference was an attempt to doctor what had been written by the wise men of the Nile Valley. So you have the papyrus bearing such names as the Turin papyrus, the Ebers papyrus, the Hurst papyrus. All these ones are bearing foreign names. But papyrus, I wanted to get one and bring, but once the time changed, so I couldn't bring papyrus. It grows in Ghana. It never grows in Europe.
I see.
So how do we have Turin papyrus? We have Turin papyrus because they stole all the things. In fact, I'll have to help your guest with reading how they got the names. The oldest papyrus is the papyrus Kahun. Now, the papyrus Smith is the brother to the papyrus Ebers. Ebers is a German name. But let's see what they talk. Papyrus Ebers is used as our founding book for the knowledge of ancient Egyptian medicine. On its reverse side, there is a little calendar with the days of Sotis, that's Cyrus with his heliacal rising, about at the beginning of the cresting of the Nile, when the Egyptian year began, from the 9th year of King Amenophis I. The Egyptologist George Ebers was a university professor in Leipzig. In 1873, an Arab in Luxor offered to sell him the papyrus. An Arab in Luxor. I went to the Egyptian embassy here in Accra with a copy, a photocopy of some hieroglyphic text, and I wanted to find out if they can transcribe it for me. They said, no, they don't. That immediately tells you that they don't know anything about the hieroglyphs. They cannot transcribe it. So if they don't, who then wrote the hieroglyphs? It was the ancient Egyptians. They wrote the hieroglyphs. And here they tell you that the Arab man found the papyrus. The papyrus Hurst was unearthed in the Dar el-Balas, Upper Egypt, by an Arab again. So this tells you the time of the invasion or occupation of ancient Egypt by the Arabs. And they were just taking everything. And the papyrus, you will see that interestingly, like I said the other time, when you are born to the royal family, your history from the time of birth to the time of death is recorded by a scribe assigned to you. Wow. So when you are dead, your papyrus is rolled and put in your tomb or sarcophagus as they called it. So these people, having taken over, their business was to look for all the treasures in the tombs, like we have the treasure hunt and people going into our cemeteries to unearth bodies and sell. So they went and took all these ones. And they were selling to these Europeans. And that's how we come by a papyrus bearing the name of Turin. You go to the British Museum today, they have a lot of documents they have taken from Egypt. And the people themselves who were there were driven away, and they moved for thousands of miles in search of a newfound land. And the newfound land has become the land we call Ghana today. Our ancestors passed through Timbuktu and what have you.
I mean, I've heard it, but is there evidence to say that indeed we are the old Egyptians that came this? Is there any evidence?
Sheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese anthropologist, had recorded in his book, after extensive research, he came to the conclusion that the Pharaoh and his descendants occupy from the Mono River to the west, to the Volta River to the east. You will see that the Akan-speaking people came in along the Guan stretch. You see the Guan-speaking people cut this land we call Ghana into two. From the Ketekrachi end to the Nzima end, you have the Guan-speaking people.
We are coming straight back after that. We want to find out which part of Egypt you came from. I must have been a pharaoh back then, you know. Who knows? Stay tuned. Well, thank you very much for staying. Education, education, education. You know, knowledge is power. And I told you in the beginning that until the lions have their own historians, you know, the stories of hunting always glorify the hunter. So here we are arriving from Egypt with empirical evidence. Any artifacts have been found that were left on the routes or something to tell my viewers that, look, indeed, we have migrated.
You will see this one. This is the delivery stool. Unfortunately, we have been tuned up that when women are going to deliver now, they are made to lie prostrate and they will be told, push, push, push. In fact, in the northern part of Ghana, one woman had developed a delivery stool. So when you're going to deliver, you sit on the stool and it's very easy. The French people, what do? When you go to the French, they have this squat lavatory. They tell you when you go and you squat, you ease yourself freely, easily, and quickly, and you are gone. But our brothers from the Western Europe, including the Americas, what do? They put a seat down. And they tell you, you are entering a rest room. So they go and sit down on the WC port, resting and reading. But the Frenchman does not want you to waste any time. So you go, you squat. In fact, when you cross into Togo, they have a lot of these squat lavatories. But when you come to Ghana, we have a lot of these sitting WC ports. So maybe that explains why we look a little bit hazy in our activities. But what went wrong with us? In fact, we are sitting in the center of the universe. What is it which has gone wrong? What has gone wrong is that we have refused to open our eyes to see.
Are there anything that we do here now that we can trace back to, the ancient Egyptians also did the same thing, and therefore it was the same people who traveled down south?
Herodotus had recorded that the ancient Egyptians were black. Mm-hmm. They had kinky hair. That is very common with all blacks, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
They possessed the powers of divination to interpret the will of God. Mm-hmm. Afa. The Yorubas call it Ifa. The divination system. So that was what the ancient Egyptians were doing. They will divine and find out, who are you? And they will tell you. In that one, we were doing here, and we still do. Only that some of us have become so Christianized that we have lost our direction. So you go to a court of law or a court of competent jurisdiction, and you go and you hold the Bible or the Holy Quran and say, I swear by the Holy Quran or the Holy Bible to tell the truth, and you lie. But if you look at this picture of the judgment chamber in ancient Egypt, the deities are in command. So how can you go and lie? You can't lie. The justices are sitting up there, 12 of them. They are on top. Mm-hmm. And your heart is put in a scale and weighed against a feather. But if we will do the same thing today here, we will just have to take, what do you call it, the bodia, the lashi from the priest or something, and swear by it. Or I swear by Antwanyama that the evidence I'm going to give is the truth and nothing else but the truth. If you lie, like Ananias in the Bible, what happens to you? You have to fall dead. And that's where they said the wages of sin is death. Lying is a sin, so you don't lie. Mm-hmm. But today we go to our courts, and when you want to talk about this, they say, no. But when you go to our shrines, they have a pot of cool palm oil. If the thing is missing, and some group of people are rounded up, you just put your hand into the cold pot or container of palm oil. If you are not the one who stole the thing, You put it and you think it's ice water. But if you are the one who did the stealing, immediately your finger touches it, you have to throw yourself away, or it will be too hot for you. If we go back to our roots and we re-establish that one, we will not have most of the problems we are having now.
Also, but the thing is that we I don't know if we were made to believe that, you know, those things are for Satan. They are not of God. You see, so that's the, and good and evil cannot live side by side. Therefore, those things, you know, have to go, and that's the challenge we face.
I want to read you what King Leopold said about our system. Where have I messed up?
See, because
King Leopold, when he was sending the missionaries to the Congo. But first, let me just remind your cherished viewers about something which appeared in the Jerusalem Post of 27th September 1985. Headed, Ashkenazim once sought help of Ethiopian Jews. When the first Ashkenazi Jews came to the land of Israel early in the last century, they appealed to the Jews of Ethiopia for spiritual guidance, asking them to send 3 of their rabbis to Jerusalem to ordain the rabbis of the land of Israel. This was taken from the Beit Hatfutzot Museum of the Jewish Diaspora. So, they acknowledge that we, the ancient Ethiopians, were just consulted quite recently. I want to see Sheikh Anta Diop's thing and read it out to you. So I was holding it some few minutes reading. Yeah. Then I will treat your viewers to what Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. You remember that name? You remember Nnamdi Azikiwe?
no, I don't remember the name.
Oh.
What did he do?
Nnamdi Azikiwe was the first president of the Republic of Nigeria.
Ah, I see.
He and Wallace Johnson were tried by the British. Now, King Leopold II of Belgium had this to tell his missionaries: Reverend fathers and dear compatriots, the task asked of you to accomplish is very delicate and demands much tact and diplomacy. Fathers, you are going to preach the gospel, but your preaching must be inspired by, first, the interest of the Belgian government. The main goal of your mission in the Congo is not to teach the African the knowledge of God, because they already know Him. They talk and commit themselves to their God. They know that killing and stealing, adultery and blasphemy are not good. Interestingly, Belgium is the headquarters of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And just quite last week or something, the U.S. Secretary of State hosted a meeting of so-called sister coalition forces, or whatever they call them, to fight the Islamic State forces. And he said because they have been bombing them, their capability is now reduced. So, now he continues, let us have the courage to admit this fact. So you do not teach them the things they already know. Your role essentially will be to facilitate the task of the administrative and industrial personnel. That is to say, you will interpret the gospel in a manner that protects and serves the interests of Belgium in that part of the world. The problems in the Congo up till today. In doing so, you will see that the savages will not be interested in the wealth that their soil possesses, in order that they do not want them. Like our Obuasi. Obuasi is there, it's supposed to be Ghanaian property but owned by foreigners. Thus, they will not be involved in murderous competition with us and dream of living luxurious lives. Your knowledge of the scriptures will help us to use special texts that commend the infidels to love poverty, such as the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom. This will cause the African to fear being rich, in order that he may go to heaven. From time to time, keep them from rebelling and keep them in fear that you will use violence. You will teach them to endure anything, even when they are insulted or beaten by your compatriots. You will teach them that whosoever uses violence is not a child of God, but he is a child of God. You will cause them to follow the example of the saints who turn the other cheek. You will take them away from anything or act that provides them with the courage to confront us. What are they taking away? I am alluding to their magic, that is juju, voodoo. If you take them away from those ones, they will not confront us. They will become as meek as a sheep, and then you can brutalize them. Your actions will be essentially on the younger people that they might not rebel. If the commandments of the father are conducive to the parents, the child should learn to obey what the missionary teaches him, because he is the father of his soul. We must force them into submission and obedience. This is King Leopold sending missionaries who are supposed to come and teach us the knowledge of God they admit we already know. Dear compatriots, these are some of the principles you must apply. You will find many more in the book that will be given to you at the end of this session. Teach the gospel to the African in an African style, in order that they are kept submissive to the white colonies. They should not rebel against the injustices done to them by the colonies. Make them always meditate on, blessed be those who weep, cry, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Always convert blacks by means of the whip. Keep their wives in submission for 9 months, so that they graciously work for you. Require from them offerings of recognition, goats, chicken, eggs, each time you visit their villages. Cause them to sing each and every day that it is impossible for a rich man to enter into heaven. Make them pay tithes each Sunday at church. Utilize this money that is intended for the poor for our business investments. Institute a system of confession which will make you good detectives in order to denounce, put down every black which has a spirit of rebellion against the system. Teach the Africans that their statues, idols, are the works of the devil. Teach the Africans to forget about their heroes in order to worship and give praise to ours. Don't give a seat to an African when they come to see you. At the most, give him a cigarette. Don't invite him to dine with you, even if he gave you a chicken every time you went to see him. Consider all blacks as little chicken and require from them to refer to you as father. My dear compatriots, if you apply all these to the letter, the interests of Belgium in the Congo will be protected for many centuries. This is King Leopold sending missionaries who came to our land claiming they were civilizing or Christianizing us. What do you make out of this? And we are still continuing this. We have people who are supposed to be men of God who will take the tithe from us and buy all the latest in the city and live in mansions and tell us that our treasures are stored in heaven. When we go there, we will enjoy. But they don't enjoy theirs in heaven. They enjoy theirs here.
I'm going to take a break, and then when we come back, we find out, do we now run a risk of losing our heritage cultures? Some 400 years from today, our children are going to say, oh, once upon a time, my grandfather spoke in a way, or once upon a time, there was a language called Twi or Ga. Stay tuned. Well, thank you very much for staying, having a heart-to-heart with Osofo Kofiche Ahaji. And just before we went on a break, we just listened to that disheartening letter from King Leopold II, which is evidence. And today you can Google everything and find out from yourself. And then ask yourself, well, with all this knowledge, why do we continue down this same path? And are we in danger of losing who we are? as a people, Ghanaians, Africans, so forth?
We are not only in danger of losing, but we have lost the greatest part of it. It is a sad reflection. What I'm going to quote is from the Metropolitan Archbishop of Kumasi, the retired Metropolitan Archbishop of Kumasi. He defines culture as what makes us who we are. And he continues that there is no human society without culture, and culture is strictly a human trait. It is what makes me who I am, an Asante and not a Dagao, an Nzi and not a Fanti. But as my culture makes me what I am, that other person's culture makes him what he is. Therefore, if I respect that other person as a human being, then I must respect his culture. Otherwise, I do not regard him as a human being. To disdain other cultures is to disdain other human beings because of their cultures, which comprises everything that is, which is different from ours. Culture, he continues, is the sum total of all activities, including the way we marry, the way we settle cases, the way we farm, the food we eat, the way we prepare it, the way we build houses, the way we welcome people, the way we should treat our children and our parents, the way we should treat our brothers and sisters, the way we should interact with our chiefs, the way the chief is chosen, the ideas we have about the world and God, the laws we have, the songs and dances and drums that go with them that we have, the religion we have, you name it. Everything a human being learns and passes on in society as a member of that society, all these combine to create the culture of a people. Now from this one, when we decide to call ourselves by some names, and we call those names Christian names, what are we doing? We are borrowing other people's eyes to see God. You can't borrow my nose to breathe. So when you want to tell me that God discriminated against me, I will beg to differ. Christianity is not our culture. It is true that most of the texts were stolen from the wise men of the Nile Valley. But when the Nicaea conference was held and the Nicene Creed emerged, all those who held on to the original ideas of the Nile Valley wise men were thrown out. So like I was saying the other time, you will see that portions of what they call the Holy Bible and portions of the Holy Quran are the same. Why? Because they all picked from the original text and doctored it to suit their interests. Today you cannot have any image of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. They expect us to say, peace be upon him. Why? Because if you have an image or a picture of the Holy Prophet, you will be seeing a black man. Just forget about all these jokes which have been going on in the name of the presentation of Yeshua ben Yosef as Jesus the Christ. Those things, those pictures are not true. So for the Muslim not to be caught in this crazy business of presenting false images of the Holy Prophet, they decide not to present any picture at all. Because they will feel guilty if they transform a black man into a white man. But the Christians and these Europeans, they don't give a damn. They can create, transform a black man into a white man. If it is possible to transform you, Nana, from being a black man
to Scandinavian,
to a Scandinavian or a Caucasian, what will happen to the message you are giving out? It is very easy to even change that one. Because if you can be made a white man with blue eyes, only on pictures, then your message will equally be doctored.
So
and that is what we are
coming back to the risk and fear of losing our culture. Sometimes I go to, child naming ceremonies, and historically there was always a bit of alcohol, salt, sugar, and honey, and it is professed into the child that as you grow, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. But gradually we see the alcohol being retracted, because now alcohol is seen as probably satanic or evil. So it's only, the last one I went was just water, and it was just water, and I'm thinking, there's something missing out here.
And are you not seeing the results? Are you not seeing the confusion which our society is going through? When the truth is there and you decide to sidestep it, you sidestep it at your own peril. We are bringing up children who don't know anything. We are sending our children to school. The saddest aspect of it is that we have what we call the daycare centers. What do? They are taking our children away from our culture. And if culture is the totality of all that we have, our language, like we are also talking now, we are speaking someone else's language. They're taking our children away from the language they should communicate in. They are taking our children away from the names they should bear. And some idiot will come and say he is a pastor or what, and he says, I bless you in the name of Jesus the Christ. And meanwhile, he doesn't even know the message that Jesus the Christ gave. He doesn't know that it is a sin to lie. Right? That is what we do. And the worst aspect of what we are facing now, when the children are trying to get out of it, they are creating so-called institutions of higher learning which misinform. The misinformation has become so rampant that every church is putting up a university. A university to do what? To continue the confusion. A university to miseducators. So you have a bachelor's degree in theology. Whose theology? The white man's theology. You have a doctorate degree in medicine. Whose medicine? The white man's medicine. Because the origin of medical practice started with our ancestors. So you go to your village and they divine and they say, what is the problem with you? You have gone to the hospital several times, you are not getting the solution. What is it which is the problem? They will do the divination. And in fact, they will tell you that if your spiritual life does not conform to your physical one, then there is a dis-ease. The ease with which you must flow will not be there. So there will be a dis-ease between the spiritual and the physical. So to solve that problem, you must solve first the spiritual problem. So they said, give some libation. Let us invoke the spirits of the ancestors so that they can help you. But you say that one is satanic. And meanwhile, these white people, they still do it. When the Queen of England is coming out now, there will be those people who will be holding fans, waving, driving away the negative forces from her way. But when it comes to you, they say no. Is the Prime Minister of England higher than the Queen of England? The Prime Minister of Britain or the United Kingdom? Is he higher than the Queen? No. The Queen is higher. The Queen is not elected in these occasional jokes. But when it comes to our turn, they said no. The one who is elected, whom you and I don't know, like that celebrated politician said, you and I were not there. You and I don't know him, but they come and bring some few...
Could it be because we don't have like one king who rules over the whole land, and therefore the elected guys become, the head, because, you have the Asante Hene over the Asantes, the Ochin Hene over the Ochin, Akwamu Hene over the Akwamus, rather than one king superseding everybody?
Recently, there was an attempt for Scotland to break away. What have we seen? Germany reunited around what? around a common language. What we are having, the white man was smart enough to gang up different language-speaking groups and created this farcical joke of a country. Because you know, once you are divided along linguistic lines, you will never see eye to eye. This man will not agree with the other one ruling over him. That one will not agree that this person is superior to him. So they continue with that confusion. They say, no, we have a United Nations. But who are those running the United Nations? It's the same old white man. He made sure that we are continuously divided.
Also, what will happen 400 years from today? Because you see, all the evidence is there to tell you that, listen, this is who you were as black people back in the days. This is how strong your history was. But as I speak to you today, I'm sure if we did a count, 8 out of 10 black people will say, no, we will never ever buy into the fact that our ancestors were great. And even if you went ahead to preach that your ancestors were great, you were seen as a lunatic. You know, he's mad because he believes that black people were great. So 400 years from today, what is going to happen?
400 years from today, I foresee a situation where we will return to our roots. The black man and the black kingdom shall rise again. We will come back to our senses. We will be the strong people. You see that the white power structure is collapsing, right? The Americans went to Afghanistan, they went to Iraq, helped all these people supposed to be democratic and what have you, and the people turned the weapons against them. Now they have to try to suppress those people. You can fool some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. The black race shall rise again.
Also, I mean, we've been through the slavery era. We've been through an era where all our history is being gone away. And as I speak to you now, the manuscripts in Mali, you know, are destroying, and these are, you know, invaluable. And they are begging for wealthy people around Africa to come so that we digitize this. But I doubt if we even realize the worth. I mean, to us, history is nothing. Everything is here and now. And majority of Africa today, Ghana and Africa today, is here and now. We don't care back and we don't care about.
Far away into Mali. We have the National Archives here. Go there and see the shame. Our politicians don't see the relevance of these ones. Now Mali may be appealing, but I doubt if anybody is going to help them sustain their thinking. You see, we talked about, the Westerners talk about democracy. When Morsi was elected president of Egypt, what happened to him? Those people who were preaching democracy, when the military overthrew Morsi and they are still keeping him in custody, the Westerners are not interested. And they want people who can help them pack everything away from Egypt so that the history will be lost. Timbuktu, why? Who is interested? You go and, if I show you some of the pictures of what they did in Egypt, the black pharaohs were transformed, the effigies, the statues were transformed to let them look like white people. The black man, according to Herodotus, he has the broad, the fan-like ears. He has the broad nose, they are thick lips. Now, when you look at some of the statues which they have doctored, the nose is pointed. The lips are very slim. And then you look at the face and you see that, no, this is not a black man.
Is it so? So it means historically, we have never guarded what we had. I mean, I think it's more historic than just us.
Now that they drove us away, it is now that we are coming back. This is the time for our renaissance. The two of us are launching a campaign to re-educate our people. We will have a resistance, but we must be ready to overcome the resistance.
So then I come back to that, you know, like King Leopold's letter, some of these black Egypt stories, should be taught in schools and get children oriented from childhood with that sense of pride.
Did you set up the school? Have you set up any school?
No, not yet.
Yes, so the one who sets up the school, and most, like I said, the universities.
But
the new universities which are coming are Christian universities.
Also, admittedly, you take all these old schools were all missionary schools, and therefore they had the agenda. But now it's been handed over to us.
To who? You and who?
Well, I mean, to the state.
Who is the state? Ask yourself, who controls the state? The state is controlled by the same old missionary-oriented people. So we are in a country where you are going to celebrate a national day or something, and you have the Christians and the Muslims, and when you talk about tradition, they say, no, that is satanic. We have the presidency, they don't want anything traditional. So which one is the state? Then this brings me to Nnamdi Azikiwe's speech.
Round it up for me, because we have, but I want to listen to the speech.
Personally, yeah. I believe the European has a God in which he believes, and whom he is representing in his churches all over Africa. He believes in the God whose name is spelled D-E-C-I-T, deceit. He believes in the God whose law is, yes, strong Europeans, you must weaken the weak. Ye civilized Europeans, you must civilize the barbarous Africans with machine guns. Ye Christian Europeans, you must Christianize the pagan African with bombs, poison gases, etc. In the colonies, the Europeans believe in the God that commands, quote, ye administrators, make sedition bills to keep the African gagged. Make deportation ordinances to send the Africans to exile wherever they dare to question your authority. Make an ordinance to grab his money so that he cannot stand economically. Make levy bills to force him to pay taxes for the importation of unemployed Europeans to serve as stool treasurers. Send detectives to stay around the houses of any African who is nationally conscious and who is agitating for national independence. And if possible, round him up in criminal frame-up so that he could be kept behind bars. That's by Nnamdi Azikiwe.
A word to the wise
is in the north.
It's in the north.
But then,
it's in the north. Also,
do you remember that in 1935?
1 minute, because I ran out of time.
Yes. In 1935, the Italians invaded Ethiopia. And His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie, made a prophecy. And that's what made him the icon of the Rastafarian movement. The Italians went into Ethiopia. Why? They went to take over the land. And the Italian soldiers were prayed for by the Pope then in Rome. They go and kill those bastards so that we can take their land. We cannot kowtow to them because that land is the land of the gods. We must destroy everything there.
Also, on that note, who knows? Maybe we'll come back and continue. It looks like it's going to be a whole series altogether. But folks, thank you very much for watching. And as I say, tomorrow we'll be back to do this all over again. Thank you very much for watching. Also, thank you so much.
Thank you for thanking me.
You're welcome.
Gafar Khan said, in the alternation of day and night, there is a sign for those who reflect. So please reflect.
Amen.